This right here is the cheapest camera in the Nikon Z system, but just how good is it for landscape photography? Let's jump right in, talk about it in this video. What's up y'all, it's Project Photography back with another video, and today before we get started, make sure to follow all of my socials down in the description bar below. Now this right here is the Nikon Z30. It's the cheapest camera in Nikon Z system, and honestly I think it can make a really great budget option for a lot of landscape photographers out there that don't want to break the bank. So we're going to be talking about a lot in this video, but we're first going to be talking about the ergonomics, the feel, and the build quality of the Z30. First of all, one thing I love is the deep, comfortable grip on this camera, and this is easily an area that Nikon could have skimped out on. You see a lot of budget cameras, skimp out on the grip in particular because they just feel like it's not as important. But Nikon has done a really good job keeping the grip ergonomically very similar to something like the Nikon Z6. Of course, the Nikon Z6 is a little bit bulkier, so it does feel a little bit better in the hands. And the Z30, on the other hand, is a lot smaller, so your hands definitely don't have as much room. But honestly, I've really enjoyed using the grip, and it makes for a really nice stable platform when using on a tripod, and especially for handheld shooting when I don't even want to bring a tripod or any of my other gear. Another fantastic aspect is the lightweightness of this camera. It's about 33% lighter than the Nikon Z6, which was already a light camera. And for landscape photography, this definitely adds a lot of benefits. First of all, we're able to hike farther because it's so much lighter, and we can actually add more gear into our bag to kind of compensate for the lack of weight that the Nikon Z30 has. We can add another lens per se, or can add some other pieces of camera gear to make up for it and improve our photography experience overall. I'm a huge fan of the lightweightness of this camera, and it's super easy to bring along with something like a Peak Design 3-liter sling with a 12-28. Makes for a really nice lightweight setup when you go out and don't want to bring an entire camera kit with you. And all this comes together to make a really nice compact form factor. And this camera is absolutely tiny. I can fit it into my smaller pockets in my Shimoda action bag, and again, it just allows me to add more camera gear into the bag because it's so small and so compact. And I'm a huge fan of its form factor, its compactness. I just feel like you're able to do so much more with it as a result. And a big part of it is a lack of an EVF. Because we don't have an EVF on there, it shaves off a lot of that height on the camera that something like a Z6 would normally have. But in replace of an EVF, we do have a flip screen. Now, this is something where I had a lot of mixed thoughts about it going into actually getting this camera. I usually like having the screen behind the camera, sort of like a Z6, but we obviously do not have that here. We just have a flip screen. And now this means that the screen is off-centered relative to the back of the camera. And now for the Z6, we have that screen directly center the camera. We just do not have that here. Usually makes for easier compositions, but honestly, I haven't found that I've had an issue grabbing compositions in horizontal orientation. But a major benefit of having a flip screen is the fact that we can see our camera in vertical orientation when it is low to the ground. And now this was a major gripe that I had when it came to the Nikon Z6, because I felt like I didn't have that ability to see my camera when it was low to the ground in vertical orientation due to the only two-way tilting screen. But with the flip screen, we can obviously see it in vertical orientation, see that composition, and honestly grab better ones as a result. One thing I'm a fan of in the Nikon Z30 is actually the control layout. It is extremely similar to the Nikon Z6. We have both of our function buttons, both of the dials. We just don't have a joystick, which honestly is okay with. I can live with that. The D-pad is just fine. But one thing that I did find was that the record button and the ISO button are switched. Now, this is okay for the most part. It does take some getting used to. I have found myself hitting the record button when I meant to hit the ISO button, but I think this is just something you have to get used to when it comes to using a Z30. But having that record button being nice and big makes it a lot easier to punch in when we're manual focusing. And this is a huge benefit, of course, when using the Z30. We can just hit the record button once and it's nice and big, easy to find, and honestly makes it a lot easier to manual focus. The control dials themselves are quite nice. They have a nice click to them. The buttons are definitely smaller than a Z6, but you don't find yourself missing them or wishing that they were bigger. They also have a nice satisfying click to them. Overall, the controls are built really well. So with all that being said, let's take a quick break and talk about our friends over at Mint Mobile. Have you ever thought about why your phone bill is so high? Well, our partners over at Mint Mobile can help you with that. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month and doesn't sacrifice on coverage, speed, or data. And if you know me, you know I love to save money on camera gear, so why should your phone plan be any different? So scan the QR code on the screen or check the link in my description if you're interested. And thankfully, switching to Mint is super easy as it only takes 15 minutes and you can do it from the comfort of your own home because of their eSIM cards. They're built on the nation's largest 5G networks and keep costs low by selling directly to you online. I've been using Mint for the past couple of months and it's allowed me to stay connected while on shoot to look at my notes, stream music, and find locations to shoot. And from now until the end of December, they have a limited time offer where you can get any of their plans and get an extra 3 months for free. So if you're interested, make sure to scan the QR code on screen or check the link in my description. And thank you again to Mint for partnering with us in today's episode. And now let's get back to reviewing the Nikon Z30 for landscape photography. So something interesting about the Z30 is that it resembles the Z50 in a lot of ways. Of course, it doesn't have an EVF like the Z50 does, but the shutter slab sounds pretty much identical. I think it has a nice satisfying click to it, and I do feel like it definitely slaps a lot more relative to something like a Z6. It's probably because the camera itself is a lot smaller and it's a lot more noticeable when that shutter slab does hit, but I don't find any issues with it when shooting with it for landscape photography. But a major aspect the Z50 and the Z30 have in common is the same sensor. So they're both the same 20 megapixel sensors, which I have raved about when it comes to the Nikon Z50. I thought it had really great image quality. And when we look at the Z30, I've actually found that it has better colors, better dynamic range, better performance overall relative to the Z50. And I personally think it probably has something to do with the processing power of the Z30. I just feel like the colors are far more pleasing. It's just better images overall. But of course, when compared to something like a Z6 that is a full frame camera, the Z30 is not nearly as good. I do feel like the images tend to be a little flatter and dynamic range isn't nearly as good as a Z6. But we have to remember that the Z6 with a $2,000 camera release, where the Z30 is about like a $650 camera at release. And that's a massive discrepancy in price. And when you compare the two images, you probably could not tell which one is which just by looking at them. They both look incredible. And honestly, the Z30 image quality wise will be really good for exactly what you need. And overall, if you just look at the Z30 by itself, I'm very happy with the images that come out of it. I've been able to capture some amazing images, as you guys can see here. And so I don't feel like it lacks in any way for landscape photography, and you can absolutely go out and capture incredible images with this camera. So here's something that I don't think Nikon can control, but as a landscape photographer, I absolutely care about, and the fact that there's no L brackets available for the Z30. I mean, there is one available, but it's on eBay. It's not necessarily a seller that I've seen or, trusted before, and I don't see any reviews on it. So to me, there aren't really any viable L brackets available for the Nikon Z30. Now, this is a slight issue, mainly because if we're using it in vertical orientation, we have to flip our camera over rather than just putting it into vertical orientation. This means a slightly less controls, not as accurate when it comes to composition, and overall a much less pleasant experience relative to just having an L bracket. And if I did want to use my Z30 in vertical orientation, I would have to bring out my other tripod, mainly because the ball head is just much more suited for vertical orientation relative than my P Design travel tripod, and that's just something that I have to kind of work around. But obviously that situation will be a lot different for you guys, and you have to decide yourself, is this a deal breaker for me when it comes to buying this camera for landscape photography? Of course, there definitely are workarounds for it, but not having an L bracket is something significant that as a landscape photographer, I definitely wish this camera had access to. And one of my favorite lens camera pairings with the Z30 is with the 24-200. Now, this is a really good lens and is obviously very lightweight. But one major benefit is the fact that we have a crop sensor on the Z30 allows me to get that little bit extra reach on a 24-200. We're turning that lens into a 36-300. And I think that's such a huge benefit and a reason why a Z30 could be so powerful in a lot of landscape photographers' bags. Imagine if you got something like a 100-400 paired it with a Z30. You'll have a 150 to 600 millimeter lens, and the 100-400 having a tripod collar totally dismisses the need for having an L bracket. And I think that's really where the Z30 will shine, is with telephoto lenses in particular. Now, of course, you could use the Z30 as a wide angle camera. I mean, I have the 12-28 and it's a fantastic lens. I have no issues with it really. But to be honest with you, where we're gonna see the most benefit is definitely with the telephoto lenses. Getting that extra reach will allow us to grab different compositions and help isolate certain subject matters in the landscape a lot better than maybe something like a Z6 would be able to do. Of course, we wouldn't have as good image quality as a Z6, but I think the Z30 can definitely handle its weight when it comes to grabbing images. But there is one thing about the Z30 to definitely be worry about when pairing it with telephoto lenses, as telephoto lenses tend to be a little bit longer, a little bit bigger, and with my 24-200, it definitely feels very lens heavy rather than being balanced. And it's mainly due to the lightweight compact body of a Z30, so it's just something that you have to kind of understand and work around. And when you're on a tripod, it'll make it a little bit more difficult to grab compositions. I don't think it'll be a huge issue, but it's just something to definitely keep in mind when using the Z30 with telephoto lenses in particular. But yeah guys, overall, I really have enjoyed the Z30 for landscape photography. Honestly, I think this will be a camera that'll be so interesting to put into my camera bag. I don't think it'll be that camera where I'm using it all the time, but in those pinch situations where I want that extra reach, or I know I'm going to a location where telephoto is going to be a main component of that location, the Z30 will be an incredible camera to use as the telephoto lens. Wouldn't really use it for my wide angle side of things. I think the Z6 plus something like a 14-30 would definitely have that covered a lot better. But having the extra telephoto reach is a huge reason why I think a lot of photographers should pick up a Z30. But if you're a landscape photographer that wants to get into the Nikon Z system without breaking the bank, or you even just want an extra second body to use as your telephoto, like I think the Z6 is perfect for that. You can find these used on eBay for $500, and if you pair the Z30 with something like a 12-28 plus the 50-250, I mean that's a sub $1,000 camera kit for landscape photography that will honestly pack a punch. Images are fantastic out of this camera, and you'll come out with amazing photos every time. So yeah guys, let me know what you think of the Nikon Z30 for landscape photography. Is this a camera that you would consider picking up? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Anyways guys, thank you so much for experiencing the role with me today. Please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.